Welcome back, everyone. I'm excited to have you here for another episode filled with 3 incredible encounter stories that you won't want to miss. If you love hearing these fascinating accounts, be sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell so you will never miss an upload. And if you have an encounter story of your own, I'd love to hear about it. Send your stories to ontariocryptids@gmail.com, and it might just be featured in a future episode. Now, let's dive into these amazing encounters. Before you pass judgment, let me preface this by saying that this is my mother's story. I'd also like to add that my mom was and still is remembered as a good, sensible person. This took place in the early to mid-70s, back when my mom was a young girl living on a remote ranch in Baja California, Mexico. She was the oldest of 6 sisters, and life on the ranch often meant waking up early to help out with chores. One of her tasks was occasionally waiting for the water delivery person to arrive. The ranch is pretty isolated. I visited it myself, and even today, it's still in the middle of nowhere. There's a highway that curves along the entrance to the property, but other than that, it's very desolate. Early one morning while my mom and most, if not all of her sisters were outside waiting for the water delivery, something strange happened. From a distance, my mom noticed a spot in the sky. At first, she didn't pay much attention to it, but it kept getting closer and closer. Eventually, it flew directly over them, and what they saw left them in shock. It was a flying dinosaur. My mom and her sister could hardly believe what they were seeing. My mom recalls learning about dinosaurs in schools around this time. She distinctly remembers her teacher explaining that dinosaurs have gone extinct millions of years ago, and in that moment, she thought to herself, they must have lied because I'm looking at one right now. She described it as a large creature with wings that flapped loudly as it flew over them. It made strange noises and had no teeth, which my mom found interesting because she learned in school that carnivorous dinosaurs had sharp teeth for hunting. Once the creature flew over them, my mom ran inside to get her Nana, grandmother. Her Nana was a kind, playful woman, but when my mom told her, "Nana, there's a dinosaur outside. Come look, fast!" her grandmother thought she was joking. Still, she followed her outside and managed to catch a glimpse of it before it disappeared. A few weeks later, my mom's uncle were headed into town to buy groceries, and my mom asked one of them to bring her back a copy of her favorite magazine. Duda lo increíble y la verdad was a popular magazine that covered a supernatural phenomena, conspiracies, and cryptozoology. When her uncles came back with the magazine, my mom couldn't believe what she saw on the cover. It mentioned a flying dinosaur that had supposedly escaped from a secret facility in San Diego and had been spotted in Mexico. She showed the article to her mother, and it was enough to convince her that my mom wasn't making the story up. According to my mom, sightings of the creature were even reported in the local newspaper at the time. About 10 years ago, I decided to ask my mom and all of her sisters about this story to see if they still stood by it. By then, they were all successful, level-headed women living in the U.S. I expected at least one of them to brush it off or say it was just a childhood fantasy. But no, to my surprise, every single one of them said the same thing. Yes, it really happened. They've even acknowledged that people might think they're crazy, but all swear it's true. The encounter occurred in 2012. The eyewitness, Alex O., did not tell anyone except close relatives and friends about it. We were informed about it by his daughter and then by the witness himself after gaining his trust. Below is verbatim account and description of the creature. I used to go there to gather mushrooms. It was 4 years ago during the first days of August. And so I drove up to this place. I left the car. My wife went to the side of the lake. I looked around, not too many mushrooms around, and started calling my wife. Lena, let's go. But she went further away, and so I couldn't hear her anymore. So I began collecting the few mushrooms that were there. I picked them and called out for my wife again. And this is what happened next. Believe it or not, I looked up and I see something like burnt wood. It was thin and black, very black. Figured it was just a burnt tree, so I didn't pay it any attention at first, and I kept walking. The tree was still standing. I went over and I thought, well, I'll take a look. I felt this attraction and urge to see this thing. Anyways, I raised my eyes and there's a head 3 times the size of mine. It looks like a monkey's, low forehead, big eyes, and it looks at me, but it literally is 4 meters away, 3 or 4 meters away the most. So this thing keeps looking at me. And it has a kind face with a pleasant expression. Not mean at all. I wasn't scared at all. It was covered with hair, and the hair was black. The skin was also black. Lips and nose just looks like a human's. But I couldn't see the torso. I didn't see any arms or legs. I focused and wanted to talk to it. Since it looked intelligent, I said, hello. Just like that. As soon as I said hello, it disappeared. Instantly. It didn't hide behind other trees. It just simply disappeared into thin air before my eyes. After a while, my wife came back. Afterwards, I had a streak of bad luck. My car had a flat tire, but I wasn't afraid after the sighting. The creature was 3 meters high, maybe even more, but the torso was very thin. It was all hairy. I don't know, maybe he was standing sideways? But the main thing is that I didn't see any arms or legs. I've always grown up around weird, unexplainable experiences, so knowing that moving in with my best friend who has a lot of weird encounters on her property didn't bother me at all. I've been coming around for 5 years before I started living here, and I only experienced little things like hearing footsteps, doors opening on their own, and basic things like that. I only actually saw something a few times, and it was over this summer, and I was basically already living at her house because of how often I was over there. So here are the following stories from before I moved in. The first time I ever saw it, it was at nighttime, and my best friend, and I'm just going to refer to her as my sister, had gone inside of the house to grab something. I was standing on the porch. Dad was out with the dog and a flashlight, so that was how I was able to see it. I saw a creature with pale, tight skin that didn't seem to fit its body at all. It looked like large animal bones shoved inside of a human skin. It was crawling on all fours towards the road, so it wasn't facing me. It didn't even acknowledge me. I just watched it until she came back, and then it was gone. It wasn't like any animal or thing I have ever seen before, and I assumed I was just seeing things. So I didn't tell her until another night on the porch, and she told me that she had also seen it before and it has always been around. She never said anything to me either because she also thought that she was crazy. At my sister's graduation party, I had gone out to a swing set with this girl. It was just us two. Everyone else was still on the porch or inside of the house, and we were pretty far away from everyone. We were shouting, screaming, trying to freak them out from where we were. Since all we had was a light at the time, they didn't realize that we were at the swing set. It was more like a manic laughter and witch voices, not actually screaming, so they would know for sure it was us. Still, a crazy thing for a group of cross-faded people to hear, although I was fully sober at this party, so I know what I saw was real. I kept seeing something running around us in what I assumed was circles. I completely ignored it. Me and this girl started talking about getting my sister and her boyfriend at the time, now ex, thank God, to play a trick on the people sleeping in the camper since we saw them head in for bed. Soon after, we saw a figure walk around the camper and shake it. We assumed they, my sister and her boyfriend, got to them first, so we stayed where we were. Eventually, after maybe an hour or so, we were talking about heading back. It was around 2 or 3 a.m., maybe even 4. We looked over and saw a tall human figure walking around the pool, and they were too tall and skinny to be anyone other than the girl that I was sitting with, since she was the only one that fit the description. We tried to think logically and assumed it was my sister's boyfriend. We decided to walk back. Once we got back on the porch, my sister's boyfriend ran up to us and started yelling at us for effing with them. My sister said she just watched us come off of the swing set, so it couldn't have been them. Apparently, we saw what they saw. They had been lying on the porch where the pool was, and someone was underneath the porch poking my sister's boyfriend in the back. This story isn't something that I witnessed, but it was what my sister and her boyfriend, and we're going to call him Evan, witnessed. He at first didn't believe my sister about what was going on and threatened whatever had been outside by saying that he was going to touch it. He was way more descriptive in his choice of words than that, but I'm not going to get into the details of what he actually said. And that's when they both saw it. My sister said that she was so shocked and terrified of what she saw that she can hardly describe what the face looked like. She just knows it was pale and extremely skinny. Now for the stories from after I moved in. When I first moved in and I was dropped off at the house, I was pretty much completely alone. I went out into the kitchen to get food, and then I heard my sister's cat, Teslie, meowing. When I got to Teslie, I heard him meowing, but I was looking at him and he was not meowing or moving his mouth at all. Something told me not to look outside no matter what I heard. I stayed with the cat since I assumed he would be scared as well. I went back into the room and I heard constant footsteps. I knew it wasn't the cats because I know what the cats sound like, and it wasn't them. I used to sit on the porch at night every night until I would, without fail every night, hear things moving on the porch or something walking around even though I was completely alone. I would hear voices that I didn't recognize, but I guessed I was hallucinating since any hallucination I've ever had has been tame. Normally I would hear conversations, but I couldn't make out what was being said, but they stopped after I moved out of my parents' home. I'm assuming they were caused from stress, so now I don't think I was just hearing things. It started to get more consistent and obvious, and recently it seemed like it doesn't care who sees it or hears it. It's like it wants us to acknowledge it or something. The scariest experience was when we were on the porch with our friend, who we are going to call Sean. We were in this hunting blind and we were smoking together, but I wasn't too high. And Sean wasn't high at all. I believe he has a much higher tolerance than my sister and I. We were talking about it, mocking it, and just joking about everything we had seen. My sister stuck her hand outside of the tent and pulled it back in almost immediately while screaming that something had grabbed her hand. I assured her it was just a bug or something, and I wanted to believe it couldn't have been the creature. After a while, we just heard footsteps and such until we all heard a male's voice speaking to us. I can't remember what it said. I thought it was Dad trying to scare us, so I yelled out to it that we could hear it. Silence. I continued to insist it was just Dad messing with us, but nothing happened until we heard the whispering. Honestly, now that I think about it, it did sound a lot like Sean. But I was looking at him, and so was my sister. She started crying because she heard the same thing that I did, and so did he. He looked confused and terrified at the same time because he was not talking at all. After that, the lights turned on without anyone being out there. We have dome motion lights on the porch and pool area, and we normally have to do jumping jacks just to get the lights to turn on. It barely works. We packed up everything and immediately went inside. Only a few days ago, we went outside to go into the hunting blind for our activities. We went out through the sliding door that time and nothing odd was on the porch. I know because I was trying to ice skate in the kiddie blow-up pool, and I know for a fact it wasn't there before. We came back to go inside and we stopped in our tracks. Dead in the center of the porch was a chunk of fresh raw meat wrapped in newspaper. We were on FaceTime with someone and showed him, but he insisted that we must have missed it. I know we wouldn't have missed it. It had been snowing here, and if it was left there a long time, it would have started to get covered up with snow. We went inside and asked Dad about it. We have absolutely no newspapers, and no one in that house would have wasted meat for a prank that didn't even get a scream out of us. The newspaper wasn't even wet. Only maybe a day before that incident, we saw these large, and I mean large, footprints right in front of our bedroom window after heading inside after a hunting blind activity. No one's shoes looked like that. They were long and thin, like a clown shoe feet or whatever. They didn't lead anywhere, and there was no trail, just one set. We went inside and assumed we missed a footprint. I know for sure we didn't because I tried to grab my sign that fell by our window, but I decided to leave it since it was already covered in snow. My sister knows they weren't there before either. By the way, we don't have any curtains in that window. Not very fun for us to find a footprint right outside of it. The house isn't that old, but the property has a lot of history. I'm not entirely sure, but I was told that the property could be haunted because of all of the horrible things that had happened here. People have died in this house, and sometimes things do act up, like Thanksgiving night, for example. I was in the bedroom by myself and my sister was in the bath, and her nephew was trying to sleep on the couch. I heard the sound of someone walking in and out of the house, the doors opening and shutting, just a whole lot of strange things. Her nephew heard it all too and claimed that he has seen things staring through the windows watching him sleep. We don't talk to him about what we've seen, but he has described exactly what we have. Multiple times, honestly. But my sister said that she heard someone knock on the door and her younger sister shouts, "Mom?" when Mom was clearly asleep on her bed. She wouldn't have done that since it could have waken her up. This was around midnight when she texted me about it, since at first she thought it could have been me. Also, I knew I wouldn't have made that much noise while Mom was asleep. Our sister was asleep at the time as well. There was no footprints or anything at all, even though you would be able to hear someone walking up to the door. Another time, most recently, we were messing around with the Ouija board, which only worked for me once. It didn't work this time, so I spelled out something stupid and threw it across the room without saying goodbye. Later that night, I saw a little boy running into her aunt's bedroom. I went outside to tell my sister what I saw, but we didn't have anything happen related to kids after that. We randomly get a strong feeling that we're being watched, or not to look outside or into the yard. I've never been afraid of the dark. I've had this feeling before at my parents' place, so I'm not sure what else to think or feel. That's all I have for now. I might update if anything else happens. Update. I saw it again last night through my window. The creature outside is unrelated to the events happening inside the house. The creature was tall, but it was too dark to see anything more than a silhouette. It looked to be about over 6 feet at least. It had longish fingers or claws. I don't know, but they looked sharp. I looked at it for a good minute and it didn't go away, so I know my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. At first I thought it was my reflection of everything in my room on the window since the TV was on. I left to go to the bathroom and came back to my sister being in the bedroom with the light on. I could clearly see the reflection in the window. That's when I knew it couldn't have been anything in the room making the shape like that. Not long after my sister left again, and I saw it put its hand in front of the window while I was sending a voice note to some of my friends who know what's been going on. It even tapped on the window 3 times. My sister came back and I immediately asked her if she heard it or was tapping on something. I got up and looked out of the window to find absolutely nothing. After I sat back down, we sat in silence for a few minutes and we heard movement and a sort of backwards whistling. Nothing else happened after that, and we just ignored it. This hasn't happened before, but my sister doesn't seem to be freaked out. I'm not sure if I am either. It just feels normal at this point. Thank you all for listening until the end. I hope you found these 3 encounter stories just as fascinating and eerie as I did, especially that last one. Leave your comments below, but it might have been a rake, but let me know what your thoughts are. If you're enjoying this content and want to support the channel, consider becoming a member and enjoy some exclusive perks. Now let's acknowledge the current OC members. I would like to thank Elizabeth, Jim, Diana, and Teresa for their contribution and support as member of the OC program. Your support is truly appreciated. And of course, don't forget to hit that like button, the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss another episode. Wishing you all a fantastic week ahead, and be sure to tune in next week for another thrilling episode on Ontario Cryptids.